Oh, okay. Oh, yes,
This is
yes,
it.
please do.
This is it. Okay, this is the teaser. They drop Firestarter. They're all over the telly. People are complaining about them. They're all over. They're blowing up on the live circuit. They're headlining Glastonbury Festival. They're doing them, and they hadn't written another track for Fat of the Land. That was it.
That was all they had.
So for the first time, really, in the Prodigy's career, they had a record label screaming at them, saying, "We need another album." And I will tell you more about how I personally slowed the whole process down. The album ended up being very, very late.
I can't wait. That sounds like a great story. But
well, as you may have guessed from the clip, we are picking up on a little mini series that we have got going, and we're thrilled to welcome back to the show Professor Rave Martin James. For those unfamiliar with the voice of the previous episodes, Martin is an official biographer of the Prodigy and has been close with the band since first interviewing them in 1994. He's gone on to write multiple books about them, including Adventures with the Voodoo Crew and We Eat Rhythm, the Prodigy story, along with many follow-ups. He's also contributed writing to The Guardian, Melody Maker, and Vox. And he's also the only man on earth to have guested on the Indy 500 podcast now 3 times, talking to us about the French Touch genre, the Prodigy album Music for the Jilted Generation, and now Fat of the Land. So, master showman who also knows how to set up an episode, Martin James, welcome back.
Hey, how are you? 3 times, eh?
Yeah, yep, nobody else. Oh. Not even our close friends who come in and want to co-host. I think he's only done twice. So you're our favorite.
I'm honored.
So I think the cliffhanger might be a good place to start, because that's kind of transferring us from the jilted time to the kind of pre Fat of the Land time. So with the band in that situation with Firestarter out and apparently nothing else, what was going on?
So Liam did produce Breathe, and then there was a huge gap after Breathe. And well, I used to run a PlayStation league in a music magazine called Music, Muzik, and Liam was in the PlayStation league, so I used to send through early versions of games through to a range of different people, including Liam and Goldie and various other people. And he got a bit obsessed with Tomb Raider and Cool Borders.
Oh my god!
And so he played Tomb Raider over and over again. And then I got the new Tomb Raider. I got a development disc of the new Tomb Raider, and so take it round to him and Leroy, who was the dancer in the band at the time, and slows the things down again. And in the end, I actually had a friend of mine at the record label phone me up and said, "Could you stop sending him games?" And Leroy had to take over from the take over on the PlayStation chart, because I'd slowed the whole thing down so much, and the record label needed this album finished, and a lot of work to go on it. He hadn't fully decided what the tracks were going to be. There were a lot of those tracks were just ideas, grooves, riffs, and beats. Or he had loads of tracks where he'd recorded vocals, but there's still loads of work to do, and he was getting diverted. This I've discovered is Liam gets diverted.
That's actually very on brand for the podcast, because we also will divert to talk about video games now and then. That's pretty incredible. Is that at all related to how some of the tracks from Fat of the Land end up on PlayStation games like Wipeout?
Well, it's the same era, isn't it? Wipeout. I mean, that was the game of the era in a lot of ways, and Fluke, I think, I remember being on it, and Future Sound of London. Oh, it's a long time ago since I even played the game. But those kind of breaks, that kind of electronic music fit really well with that kind of gaming. Same with snowboarding. It was a great soundtrack to snowboarding. So
Yeah, really. Yeah, I
so I
mean,
think
it's people
yes,
say propulsive, and like, yeah, whenever
yeah,
there's a game where you're kind of racing or going ahead, like the Prodigy will fit. Like it just works.
yeah, totally. And if you've ever driven listening to the Prodigy,
Hmm.
you drive
Hmm.
faster as well.
Yeah, out of all the albums we've done, I think we always talk about whether something is a sitting at home listening album, on speakers album, driving in your car album. Both Prodigy albums 100% work for driving around.
Yeah,
Sometimes too well, go a little too fast, I find.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's encouraging you to
you've
hit
got
the
to remember
gas.
at this time, as well as being into gaming, they're all adrenaline junkies as well. So they're all massively into snowboarding, and Keith was doing jumping out of planes and doing that version of boarding. Um,
Yeah,
they were total adrenaline junkies. So
and that
which kind of
makes a lot of
makes
sense when you when you listen to it. Like they have they have a connection to just kind of the kind of visceral excitement feeling. Like they know that makes a lot of sense to hear that because the music's being made by someone who is connected to that feeling. So yeah, that all ties together and makes sense.
Martin, did they ever get you to jump out of a plane?
never.
Oh,
I was, yeah, I was supposed to go snowboarding with them at one point, and I for some reason I couldn't go. But that was a thing in the 90s where a lot of PR people would have this great idea of taking you snowboarding with the band. And so I ended up snowboarding with quite a few different artists, but never the Prodigy. I probably would have died snowboarding with them because I'm not an adrenaline junkie. I'd rather sit at the top of the piste and have a little drink
Hmm.
and watch it all going on. I mean, I did snowboard, but snowboarding is what other people might call falling over.
Oh yeah, yeah. That was
My
me. That
version.
was me too. And I've also
Yeah,
had the experience of going snowboarding with somebody who's better at it than you, and getting taken to the runs that are maybe a little ahead of you. And yeah,
yeah.
I might prefer jumping out of the plane. I've never done it, but that was pretty scary as well.
The things like they're 10 years younger than me, and Liam is, and when I first met them, that made a big difference.
Oh yeah.
I had my first child, and they were still young men. Invincible. I was very much not invincible anymore.
So going back, kind of at this time, so last time we spoke, we talked a lot about the kind of underground UK rave scene. So going into Fat of the Land, is it still as illegal and unknown or small, or has it changed by the time that this album is starting to get put together or coming out?
So it totally changed pretty much during the last album, during Jilted, because the Criminal Justice Act came into play, which made it illegal to go to rave, to dance to music with repetitive beats. It made it
That's right.
illegal to drive in a convoy. So all the things that were linked to the underground illegal rave scene were made illegal. So it's the first time that youth culture was legislated against in the UK. Um, this album comes out the time following that. So a lot of the clubs, a lot of the raves went very overground, turned into these big super raves. But we kind of see the underground went back to the clubs. So you see, again, 94, 95, you really mainly club based, back, and all the different subgenres that are emerging from the dance scene were linked to particular clubs. So you see kind of that whole period, when you see Prodigy's hardcore rave, hardcore breakbeat sound developing. At the same time, you've got the drum and bass jungle scene developing. You've got the house scene. You've got the techno. All these different scenes are developing at the same time. By the time Pat the Land comes out, the Prodigy have got nothing to do with the rave scene. Really, they've completely moved over to a more traditional rock music circuit. They're linking the same attitudes that they had with that they drew from rave. But they're really bringing out a lot more punk roots. And the rave scene kind of became like the super clubs started to emerge at this time. So this is beginning the real Ibiza super club era and all that stuff, which has nothing to do with the Prodigy. All the house stuff and all that, which eventually becomes EDM. There's nothing to do with the Prodigy. They'd already left it miles behind. They're in a different arena totally. And this album is, if Jilted woke a lot of the rock and indie audience up, this album just played straight into them. This came from their live show. I've said this a few times, that the pattern of all the Prodigy albums has been the same so far. I bet they proved me wrong on the next one, but it starts with the Underground album. So this is the representation of the underground, which is kind of very much for the fans. Then the next album is a huge development. It's a kind of like taking on different things and moving in different directions. The third album is the live album. That's the album that's been inspired by the live show, and that's happened. And it happened both. But we've got 7 albums now, but the iteration happened twice in a row, where you have Underground, experiment, grow, and then representation of the live scene. This is the representation of the Prodigy live. This album.
And was that like a conscious decision, or we talked about it being something that was made a little bit under duress. So was Liam and the band, were they like creatively, were they just taking what comes, or did they have a plan for making that kind of representation of their live sound in an album?
No, I don't think anything's ever planned in that way with the Prodigy. I think Liam. Well, what I know about Liam is that he spends a long time collecting the sounds, messing with ideas until he knows what it's going to sound like. So there's an awful lot of playing with things, and that can go on for years before an album starts coming together. He might have sound palettes that he draws on. It's not like he sits down like a traditional band and we're going to write our new album now. Hey, 10 songs and we'll choose so many from those 10. It's pulling stuff from his catalogue and developing new ideas all the time until the montage, the patchwork starts making sonic sense to him. And then he starts feeling like he's got an album. He's got an idea, a focus for an album. But before that, I mean, if you look back at his press, every couple of years he'll say something like, "Oh, I don't believe in albums. I think albums are a waste of time," because they take a lot of work for him to find that sound. So I don't think it's ever been deliberate. This is just a pattern that I've noticed. And with this album, I don't think there's anything deliberate here. I don't think it was like he said, "I want to make an album that'll break America. I want to make an album that's going to work on radio." He wrote an album that was representative of him and the band at that time, and it was always 100% integrity. That's the key thing. It's always integrity. They're not on a major label in the UK. They're still on independent labels, and they're licensed to major labels around the world. Maverick in the US, but at that time it was Maverick anyway. But you know, they're strictly kept that underground punk vibe of what they want to do is what they want to do, and they won't bow to any record company interference.
Yeah.
Just trusted
that-
friend.
Yeah, that kind of confrontational punk sound that becomes much more forward on Fat of the Land is that resulting more from, you know, that attitude of Liam's or other people in the band, or is it, you know, you talked about the collection of sounds, does it evolve just from the collection of sounds he's amassing at the time?
I think it's inspired. It's partly the collection of sounds, but it's inspired by what he's listening to, obviously, what he's experiencing. I think I mentioned before that the previous two albums were inspired by the rave scene. With some tracks on the last album bringing guitars because he was discovering bands like Nirvana and so on. And with this album, they're on the festival circuit, they're on the global festival circuit. So on the one hand, that if you look at the festival circuit at that time, on the one hand it was Rage Against the Machine, and the other hand it's the Wu-Tang Clan. So those festivals, a lot of the festivals that were going from country to country were a huge genre mashup. I mean, you see it, you know, hip hop after that, the Cypress Hill effect. You know, Cypress Hill starting to introduce guitars into their set as well, and it's not because of the Prodigy; it's because they're all hanging out with each other. And so that inevitably was going to have an impact on Liam's thinking. You know, he also go back to his early youth. The first music he's listening to, the Specials. So he's kind of got that ska version of punk as a early taste. It's not Fishbone, but it's a kind of an early ska punk mashup. So he's trying to make sense of that stuff pre-rave and all the stuff that he's listening to now, place it into a context of the kind of dance music or electronic music that he's interested in making, which I would say at this stage is probably a lot more inspired by Public Enemy and some of the beats, the way he's working beats, than it is by the old hardcore rave scene.
Yeah, and those bands, you know, those bands you mentioned, especially Rage Against the Machine, there seems like at that time there seems to be a real conscious attempt to figure out how to marry guitars and electronic music and hip hop. And like I feel like the Prodigy and Rage Against the Machine, coincidentally, you know, being kind of partnered up on the tour there, those are to my mind like the two who are most successful at it. We kind of, you know, on the show we just get random albums from that Enemy list, but lately the random albums we took up included we had Exterminator by Primal Scream, and it's very early here, I'm blanking, but we had kind of, it was kind of a mini series on like the 2000s. Hila, do you remember what else we had?
Mezzanine, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
The episode we're working on now is Mezzanine by Massive Attack, another one where, you know,
there are actually connections between Liam and Mezzanine.
See, yeah, I was going to ask, especially because that's so forward on our mind right now. but yeah, like it seems like this early 2000s era, like everybody's trying to figure out, how do I get guitars into my, you know, electronic and hip hop music, and the Prodigy, I would say, is like number one at figuring that out.
Yeah, but like I said before, Liam Howlett was he was a b-boy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was a DJ and in a hip hop crew, and that was his background. So he thinks first and foremost when he's creating music, it starts from that hip hop background. His DJing moves on to hip hop into the breakbeat, but breakbeat rave was based on hip hop breakbeats. sped up. You know, it's Bones Breaks. As I said before, it's New York hip house, which is using the break beats from the hip hop scene and applying electronics to it. So he's kind of been doing that all along. It's a natural progression to bring guitars in, and like we said before, we brought it on in the previous album, and also brought guitars in live as well. And they'd become more. They'd start to dominate more and more. The guitar sounds live. But I think whether they were ahead, you know, there were other people were doing this, you know, and I can't remember the time scale, but was Public Enemy and versus Anthrax before?
Ooh, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, that one was a little bit before that, but I mean that was huge.
And yeah, and I think you can't ignore the global success of those rock bands that introduced hip hop into their sound as well. So, you know, much as it pains me to say sometimes, but you can't ignore the Red Hot Chili Peppers in that in bringing that brat rap to funky rock, and then 24/7 Spies and Living Colour and all that sort of era. And Jane's Addiction for bringing that funkiness. They're all kind of happening at the same time as the dance scene as well. The Jane's Addiction album was very much, a lot of the ravers would also love to dance to Jane's Addiction. So that crossover was happening naturally. Also, you've got to remember the early raves weren't just dance music. They'd have live bands playing and all sorts of stuff. It wasn't just here's the latest cuts from America. Because there wasn't enough music. There wasn't enough rave music. So you know, it used to be much more diverse in the early days. So there's an inevitability about other bands picking up on guitars. It wasn't just the Prodigy. What I think what they did was actually show how you could have a global success with this sound. But I think it'd be wrong to say, for instance, Massive Attack started using guitars to also have a global success. I think there was a very natural progression in their production, and you know, a lot of bands also playing live in festivals. This is a thing that hip hop acts found, playing these big arenas and playing to DJ or pre-recorded stuff into backing. It's kind of flat. It's kind of dead. It's really hard at that time. It was really hard to make the music jump in a big arena. So that's why they started introducing live bands. So there's kind of a natural development, and of course with Massive Attack, they kind of come from a jazz and funk environment anyway. So guitars are as natural to funk as they are to rock. But if I say Prodigy, I really think showed everybody that you could have global success with this kind of music, and a lot of artists followed that. A lot of bands tried to do the similar thing, and a lot of bands failed dismally trying to copy the Prodigy.
And at what point during the kind of, you know, from the introduction of the first few tracks to, you know, through the Fat of the Land kind of time, when did they start realizing that they were having that crossover success, or that it was going to be something much bigger than Jilted?
Well, in the UK, it was as soon as Kerrang started writing about them. So Kerrang's our heavy metal magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd say Kerrang picked up on the Prodigy really quickly. So they were writing about them during Jilted, but you knew as a journalist, you knew they were getting that kind of success because of how hard it became to pitch for a feature, because everybody wanted them across the board. It was the same for live. So they were getting the big rock festivals approaching them to play, as well as the more mainstream, as well as the electronic festivals. So, I mean, what's interesting to me is at the same time this was happening, you had the electronica invasion, the UK to America electronica invasion. all those artists like Underworld and Orbital and Aphex and I remember I went on one with Fluke and various others, and Prodigy had nothing to do with that. They sidestepped that entirely, so they didn't play that game at all. But they kind of, I think it was quite canny. I think Liam was quite canny here. He realised that he was going to get crossing over more than most dance acts.
And you've written about, the recording process for Fat of the Land. How as the tracks are coming together, how focused or fragmented is Liam like at the time? And is he feeling the pressure and rush? I mean, obviously maybe not that much because he's got PlayStation time. But how what's his headspace like as this is really starting to become an album, and was this included in his kind of tradition of saying now this is not going to be an album, or was that or was it known the whole time that this was going to be a follow-up?
Yeah, I mean, they always knew it was going to be a follow-up album. It was planned from the beginning. What it was going to sound like wasn't clear. Obviously, the success of Smack My Bitch Up and Breathe kind of defined a lot about the album. So by that stage, he knows what he's doing. He knows it's got good sound. But the thing with Liam, it's about that moment of locking in. So as soon as he locked in and finds the focus, then he's in. But the album had already gone to promo, and he still hadn't. So it was gone to mastering, and he still hadn't finished the final track. So the rest of the album had been mastered, and he was still finishing "Fuel My Fire." So he worked right up to the deadline, and in fact, on the next album, he even during the mixing process, the mastering process, remixed it again and reworked parts because in the mastering process you start hearing it in a different way. So there's a meticulousness about his work. His team, his production team he works with, have a similar approach. They know exactly what they want, and they're very strong at getting that sound. I think there's a form of perfectionism in there. There's also a hyper focus. There's an incredible hyper focus when it's locked in, but it's waiting for the lock in. That's always the thing. I mean, we're coming to 8 years, I think, since the last album. 7 or 8 years right now, and all the fans are screaming for an album this year. But you kind of, shit happens. You just got to wait for him to do his thing.
It'll be great when it gets here. Yeah, but exactly, we're gonna have to wait. So I'm curious. Yeah. It's always been kind of a Liam-led endeavor. What was like the contributions from the other group members? Whether it was just conceptually any music itself, or was this just a straightforward Liam album?
Well, all the Prodigy albums are Liam albums. Liam is the Prodigy. So the rest of the band are first and foremost initially for the live experience. You've got Leroy, who danced and once or twice played keyboards on stage. Maxim, who's the MC, and then Flinty Keith was the vocalist. So when they did Firestarter, Keith kind of said to Liam, let me have a go at doing that. Let me have a go at doing vocals. And Liam didn't think much about it. Yeah, no, this is going to be shit. And it ended up being pretty cool. But what Liam didn't leave it at that. He chops the vocals around. He helped write the lyrics so they float. it's not just a pure, simple, I'm going to sing my lyrics. Liam's still involved in every process there. And which is exactly the same on the last album, the previous album. So every contribution from Keith on the Keith tracks and Maxim on his tracks, like for instance Breathe with Keith and Maxim doing that kind of duel against each other. It starts with swords in a sword fight, and it's a duel. Liam's directing all the way through. He's vocal editing. He's cutting the vocals. He's making the vocals work with the track. So he's being the consummate producer in that way, and very much like a DJ as well. He picks the vocal, the lyric that works to his music. Not the best lyric all the time, but this works better. Smack my bitch up, which of course they don't play. They black out the words. The offensive word now. They block it out. But with that, the full vocal sample is better, but it doesn't work with the music. So just cutting out those it fit with the music. So
right, it's another instrument instead of being some lyrical prose,
which is exactly how he treats it, which actually does upset some singers. I know some singers get really bothered by how he'll then chop up the vocals, and it's not what the singer thought they'd done, because he's and there are tracks that didn't get on this album partly because of that. I think this because he worked with lots of other vocalists on this album. Lots of such tracks that didn't get released.
And once the album's out, especially with the influence of music videos, like Keith and his look become, they become iconic on their own, and a big, almost like a face of the Prodigy for a lot of people. How did Keith and Liam kind of react to the world's, like the world's reaction to, like the videos for Firestarter and things like that?
Well, obviously, on the one hand, realistically, it brought them success. It brought them MTV success, and to get on the kind of exposure they were getting through those two videos. Firestarter and Breathe got so much exposure. That's an amazing. That was that they were very aware of the power of those videos, but. But I was with them in airports where people would run up to them and shout, "Prodigy, Prodigy," and then run to Keith.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
Now, Flinty had been a dancer who'd only recently had started doing vocals on stage. He didn't, and the rave arena was anti-ego. We didn't like the idea of front people and that. It's the MC. So lead singers are an anathema, and suddenly Keith's been forced out to the front, even though he was only on a few, handful of 4 tracks maybe by the album. He didn't want it, but he was being forced to be the pop star. He was being forced to be the rock star. Luckily, he had the character to be able to take it on to an extent. He was really quotable. When he was in the frame of mind, he was great fun to be with. Mad, did crazy things, and just a lot of fun. There was a dark side to him as well, but so he was kind of for a journalist. He was a natural singer. He was brilliant. It's what you look for, that great front person who can give you great quotes. And unfortunately for Liam, for all Liam's integrity, and he's this incredible producer, he wasn't as funny as Keith. So Keith could carry interviews and he'd say things that are quite outrageous, and it fit with him. I'm not saying Liam was a boring interview, but it was a different kind of interview. And I interviewed Liam far more than I ever interviewed Keith, to be honest. Keith was a lot of hanging out. It caused huge problems in the long run. The following album, Always Outnumbered, Never Outgunned, doesn't feature Keith at all, or Maxim. Because, and part of that is Liam had to remind the world that he was the prodigy. The downside to that, although I prefer it as an album, the downside is it didn't sell, and they got dropped from their label, and the MD, the rumor, it's a rumor, the MD of Madonna's label Maverick heard it and threw it out the window through his or threw it in the waste bin or something. So it got leaked online really quickly as well. Those early days, that's another story. But it was, and actually that's quite interesting because Fat of the Land, Fat of the Land, I got sent on a cassette, and the promo cassette, and I was sitting in a cafe in Greenwich in London, just chatting to my friend and going, I've listened to it, blah blah. I was describing it to him, and this guy who was sitting next to me said, "Is that the Prodigy album you're talking about?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, and then offered me a ludicrous sum of money to buy it off me, and we just happened to be sitting in the cafe in the market where this market where you basically pretty well got all your bootlegs from. So that was kind of hot property. You're hot property when the black market wants to buy your your albums.
He probably had somebody following you for a moment after that. Duck it into dark alleys.
But the thing is, it caused a lot of problems with the band. You think that Liam and Keith lived next door to each other by this stage, and they were they're really close mates in the whole band. I think Liam was probably closest to Keith, and Leroy in the early days, but Leroy kind of left not long after this. It was caused a lot of problems.
And it's, we brought up Massive Attack for just a minute there, but it is kind of interesting because they're also going through. I mean, I think theirs started before the recording process, but definitely afterwards. They're going through an album that kind of fractures them as well. Now they're more of a, connected band of musicians, but yeah, what was the connection at the time between like Liam and Massive Attack? I think I had seen there was one remix for either Mezzanine or the album that followed, but I wasn't able to. I think I did a quick search and I wasn't able to find what else, if they were aware of each other or if they're friends or.
So in the process immediately after Fat of the Land, there was a massive pressure on Liam to produce a new album, but he recorded a track for The Beach, which is the film The Beach, which is Alex Garland is the author of that, who's one of his oldest friends, and in fact, Alex's son and Liam's son are in the band together now. So that shows the close connections there. And if you look at the Experience album cover, there's a cartoon illustration inside, and that's by Alex Garland as well. So he had this film The Beach, which Liam's future wife is in All Saints, and she did Pure Shores. They did Pure Shores on that album. It was kind of a massive deal, and Liam recorded a track with 3D from Massive Attack for that album called No Souvenirs, and they withdrew it, and it's become pretty much the legendary never released track. It's the track, probably the one song that I get asked most about of all the outtakes. I think that without a week doesn't go by without somebody emailing me saying, asking, what was the track like, and can I send them my copy? Like I don't have a copy of it. I heard it in Liam's car, but it was very unlike both bands. Put it that way. It's kind of closest cousin. I don't know, it's a long time since I've listened to it, but it partially reminded me of Breathe, but it's kind of a little bit Beach Boysy in parts as well. It was kind of like a psychedelic, really psychedelic track. I'd love them to do something together again, but neither of them were happy with it, and they pulled it, they withdrew it. So that was the connection to Massive Attack, but they come from the same sort of ideologies, if you like, the same sort of that underground hip hop attitude that pervades both artists, regardless of what the end sound is. It's still got that part of hip hop that's a bit like punk. The DIY will do this, we do what we want attitude.
So with the success of Fat of the Land being what it is, does that make it any harder for Liam to stick to his attitude of kind of following his instincts and waiting for that moment of inspiration? I mean, you'd mentioned having pressure from the outside world on getting Fat of the Land out. I'm sure after Fat of the Land, that pressure is probably a whole different kind. So,
yeah.
Does he completely push back against that, or does he feel, like now is the time to strike again?
So he did start recording really quickly. He had a little bit of time off, then moved house to the castle. Built a studio inside his house, which was the dream studio, every piece of kit you can imagine, and got stuck into recording there. Neil McClellan, who was working with him, who's his usual engineer, co-producer, and they recorded a few songs, including the track "No Souvenirs," and he was just sick of it. He didn't like it. And what he did was he junked an album's worth, well, half an album's worth, with all the ideas as well. He just literally he shut the studio door and turned the key on the studio and threw the key away, and said, and junked an album. You imagine the record label going, "We need this album," because bear in mind, Fat of the Land pretty much paid for Adele. They signed a lot of artists straight after the success of Fat of the Land. It brought certain issues with it for a small label because it increased their tax bill and stuff like that. But they gave them enough new money to play with to go and build a mega pop star like Adele. Yeah, you got Prodigy to thank for that. Okay, so there's that kind of pressure. The record labels' plans. There's also you've also got this huge touring mechanism. I talked about that before. That the Prodigy, by this time Liam is employing a huge amount of people in as the Prodigy. All the crews, all the management companies, all the different things that go towards making a successful international company. You've also got Madonna's label. You've got Maverick shouting, "Where's the next album? Where's the next album?" And for him to just say, that's to me is proof that if you want to look for a punk in the world of commerce, he's still got punk. And I don't know many bands that would do this, like 3 years in, maybe just junk the whole thing when he's got it. And the deadline. I remember the deadlines being every week. There was a new deadline getting put back and back and back until it hit this point where you might as well forget it. There may never be another Prodigy album. It was just so off in the clouds, the idea. He did a DJ album. He did loads of other stuff, but not the Prodigy album. And then eventually, with the Always Outnumbered, Never Outgunned, he got Reason, the DAW, the Reason DAW, and sat in his bed basically, and built beats using a hard drive of noises, the sounds that he'd put together, and using a basic DAW, and built the next album in a very punk way. And I think that was what it was really. The success of Fat the Land brought the situation where there was nothing to work for, and it was all there. Everybody wanted the next smash hit. That didn't mean anything to Liam. He didn't want to have another number one. He didn't care about that. What he cared about was the next thing has the same integrity as he went into the Fat the Land project with, and he gone into every project with.
And the rest of the, as this is happening, you'd mentioned there is some crossover with other electronic acts happening, and are any of those other acts, were they reacting or commenting, or was anybody even close enough in that scene to Liam to either were they to let were they happy, were they jealous, was there what was there any
No.
reaction from other bands at seeing the Prodigy become like a large rock band, or had he already removed them from that scene enough that that he wasn't getting their letters?
Everybody talked to in the early underground rave scene have nothing but pride for the Prodigy. They did what everybody wanted to do. And the fact that people are very aware that they remained underground. You didn't get any disco tracks from them. They didn't become breakbeat, chemical beats, or big beat because it was fashionable, like a lot of other artists did. They laid a blueprint and moved on. I've never heard a bad word against the Prodigy, or certainly Liam. There's people that don't like the new stuff as much, but there's a whole new generation that are really into the new stuff. I think they're probably one of the most respected bands, and that's across the scene. So you talk to people in the rock scene who really respect them. Massive Attack in the trip hop, or the horrible name trip hop, but that sort of area.
We spent a few weeks observing that fact.
even like Moby, for instance. Moby toured with them, and I said this before, that they toured America together and shared a bus, and he was well known for being vegan and anti-drugs, blah blah blah, and they were sitting smoking weed all the time, very strong weed, Cypress Hill strength weed, and on the same bus, and he kept on having to tell them off because he was getting stoned from secondary smoke. They didn't get on with each other, but even he's got massive respect for the Prodigy. He really likes what they're about. And what again, constantly in my career, I've had people referring to the genius of Liam Howlett, and there is a genius in Liam Howlett's work. And I think what's people often don't get about him is not politically motivated. There's not an ideology in what he's doing. It's just it's honest. It's deeply honest. And in fact, Fat the Land got criticised heavily for not being, in the UK press, for not being ideological enough. So saying it was kind of empty. Whereas the previous album could get linked to the Criminal Justice Act, this one was it was empty. It was just about adrenaline. But if you want a perfect picture of 1996, 1997, that's it. It was an ideologically empty era of mass consumption and adrenaline experience. So I think it's a really powerful statement from that point of view. I've rambled on all over the place there. I always do.
That's what we called you for, though. we love being able to have guests that do that. But kind of speaking of, do you think there's any one like specific moment from, you know, the real thick of that time, like a specific gig or interview with them or story that happened, you know, that kind of you think perfectly captures like that, you know, that year or that moment of 97, 96 with them?
There's not one that sums up. Things like standing on side stage at Glastonbury and watching all people come across the hill from what I think was an Oasis, walking away from Oasis to come and see the Prodigy and watching the field fill up. There was one in I think it was Leeds Festival, I've never seen a space so packed that from as far as you could see, even beyond all the stalls, everybody trying to see the Prodigy, and them having to stop the gig constantly because people were being forced onto the barriers, and that was just incredible to see, and frightening as well. Tea in the Park in Scotland, where people were going insane for them, and there's all this red dust flying everywhere, and it was like it felt from a second it felt like we were in kind of some Australian outback. It was just insane. God, I mean, so many. Chelmsford, which was a gig that was near where they're from, whizzing around on four-wheel bikes, you know, what they're called, track bikes, but the four-wheeler things. I forgot what they're called. Anyway, yeah. Running around on those things, racing and crashing, you know, Keith straight into the barriers, straight into. It was just so much fun. Getting ridiculously drunk with Dave Grohl, for me, is a personal memory. Getting ridiculously drunk with Dave Grohl and standing side stage, watching, and next thing I know, Dave's climbing up the rigging in the old style rigging to get on the speaker. So I join him, and the bouncers naturally pulled him down and let him go and tried to kick me out. I mean, so many memories that some of them an awful lot that can't be repeated. But many. Oh God, we did one in Spain, which was hilarious. It was a snowboarding event in southern Spain, and they couldn't. They built this slope with the fake snow, but they couldn't actually get the snow to ice long enough because it was so hot. It was just bonkers. It was insane. It was madness. And all those are just experiences. But I think really the one thing that I'll never forget is the response to the Firestarter video. Because, you know, suddenly the national news was interested, and you know you've got some kind of breakthrough when Sky News are on the phone saying, "Come in and talk about the Prodigy," or the terrestrial TV news, the big stations came over and filmed me in the Melody Maker offices, talking about they wanted the scoop on Keith, and they're going, "Oh, what kind of wild gay is he?" And I'm going, "He's just a really nice bloke." They wanted me to say that he was devil worshipping,
of course,
yeah, whatever. But I said, no, he's a nice guy.
He's crazy. Yeah, he's absolutely crazy.
You know, like so many crazy people, he was a different person in private. He was crazy.
So,
yeah, that's
yeah. So we're almost I can't do the math. I think we're almost at the 30-year anniversary of Fat of the Land. Let's none of us think about what that means for for our own ages, but even now, you know, I can hand anybody who hasn't heard that album, and I have no doubts. As long as they're, if basically as long as they're music oriented, I feel like I can hand that to somebody and be pretty sure it's gonna resonate. What do you think does that, and what's the special sauce for Fat of the Land that lets it kind of live on in that way?
I'm going to say integrity again. It's not forced. They're not trying to be somebody. It's honest. It's really deeply honest, but also it understands beyond dance music. So a lot of the breakbeat stuff, a lot of the bands that tried to be like the Prodigy, because didn't understand beyond the dance music, or the rock people who tried to do the crossover in the other way. Quite a few they didn't understand, which Liam had this understanding of both, and he was developing a really deep understanding. But for me, you put on the first track, and Smack My Bitch Up starts off. It's really tinny, it's really toppy. For the first, there's quite a few beats, and then suddenly it comes in with that, and it's like a deep explosion. It's like, whoa, and you're sucked into some kind of vortex thing. And to me, that's one of the most incredible openings. I'm going to be honest, though, I don't think the whole album, for me, I've always said this, that whole album doesn't do this for me. I think Feel My Fire is awful. I had the pleasure of standing with L7.
It does kind of, yeah. Feel My Fire. I was kind of scratching my noodle as you mentioned that was a last minute addition, because it does kind of it does kind of stand apart as something that sounds more like I don't know. There's I don't know if it was around back then, but there is a real like that beat and the speed of it. Like there's a whole genre now of kind of electronica that's more I don't know if it is the I'm not as versed, but I don't know if it is the happy hardcore thing, but that's what I think of when I hear that, and yeah, that's like when you said that was a late addition, it kind of made me nod like, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
There's a remix of it that Giz Butt, who was the live guitarist, didn't play on the album, but he was the live guitarist. He did a remix of it with a guy called Chris Needs, which is full on thrash metal, which is actually, I think, better. I prefer it. The beats aren't quite right, but I really like it. Feel My Fear. I always felt the album was a really unsatisfactory ending to an album. So as I said in the books, that it feels like there needs to be one more track. That one more track is missing. He did a track called No Man's Army with Tom Morello around this time, which would have been a better finish. But they did that for the Spawn soundtrack. But I thought it was quite a weak ending to the album, and I think that might be where the pressure can be seen, or it could be a hint at the next thing, or where his mind's going at that time. But I think it's the one album where he gives over one track where he gives over to his idea of punk more than his idea of the fusion of everything, and it's not the Sex Pistols, which is I think I thought it might be. I've told him all these things, so it's nothing unusual here that I'm saying. And I really, really, really dislike Narayan, or whatever it's called. I just don't think he was up to the standard of production as other things he's done in a similar vein. I think it was not quite done. You know, it kind of. Sometimes I get when I listen to music, I sometimes have this feeling of this is not quite finished. This is not quite there. This is one of those. It didn't sit right with me. I don't like the vocals on it. I think he's a horrible singer. Maybe that's the problem. but I've got to say the rest of it, and the Diesel Power. Oh my God, Diesel Power might actually be my favourite Prodigy track. It's just got everything in there, and it's got that the Public Enemy trick of on the first beat of each bar having a bass surge. So it's boom, boom. I'm terrible at doing beatboxing, but
that one also lets that one also lets the vocal kind of, you know, you'd mentioned that it gets chopped up. That's one spot where he lets it kind of ride and go too.
It still would have been chopped up. It still would have been chopped up. I mean,
just with larger chunks.
I just recently interviewed Princess Superstar, who was on the next album, Always Outnumbered, and she did a full vocal to a different track, and he just cut out the bits that he liked and put it into another track. Yeah. And she said to me, I hadn't actually listened to the other track. She was so upset. It's only recently that she's actually gone back and listened to it.
That's so interesting.
And sensitive artists.
People would be offended.
Well, you know, I think I think there's an awful lot of musicians that come into Liam's orbit as well that may go into the studio and jam with him or make some noises, and they think, and they go around telling everybody, I'm going to be on the new Prodigy album. But no, there's kind of he might end up just pulling out a little bit of reverb or a little bit of feedback, and then playing around with that feedback noise, and you won't even recognize yourself on the album. So, you know, he's just know you've been in the orbit of the album, and that's pretty cool to have been in the orbit of any of his recording.
That's interesting. Yeah, I can't believe you know, it's funny, I think when we did Jilted, we didn't roll that one randomly, but it was kind of interesting that we, you know, after we did that one and we talked to you, know, we did want to do a follow-up, but we actually did randomly roll Fat of the Land. So it was kind of fate. It was fate that brought us back and reminded us we need to pick this thread up. So again, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us again. I think we will inevitably have to, you know, it's in my opinion, a set of 500 albums should at least include one more Prodigy. I'd have to look at the timeline and where Invaders Must Die came out, because the list is from 2013, but I feel like if you've got...
Oh no, 2007, I think.
Martin, do you have a favorite post Fat of the Land album of theirs, or kind of a high watermark after that?
I love Always Outnumbered, Never Outgunned. I think it's an incredible album. I really like Invaders Must Die as well.
Invaders Must Die was 2009, so it could have made the list. And I feel like if you've got 500 albums to to go through, I personally would have had Invaders Must Die on there.
Yeah, it's a funny one because it was an album that a lot of the old school Prodigy fans didn't like, and it brought a brand new fandom in, and you really saw everything change live, and they got bigger than ever then as well. I mean, there is, before we wrap it up, there's a very important fact about Fat of the Land that kind of often gets dismissed. Is on the week of release in the UK, I mean, it went to #1 all over the world, but in the UK, its sales were the equivalent of all of the rest of the top 2 albums. And the album, the second in number 2 slot, which was also released on that day, was OK Computer by Radiohead.
Oh my god!
Which it outsold by 8-1. So there were queues. Now this is hard to imagine now in these days, but there were queues. Some of the record stores had to open at 12 o'clock at night to start selling the copies of the Prodigy Fat of the Land. People were queued up for the stores to open. They were having to put posters up in the shops saying, "We don't have the album yet. We don't have the album yet." And then when it was there was that kind of a hype about it, and that was something I hadn't experienced since the Sex Pistols, to be honest. That kind of level of hype, but this was beyond. This was huge, and I think that's something that the Prodigy will never experience again. I think the funny thing for me is I talk to people now, and I'm currently writing another book, the part 2, the after Fat the Land, and people say, "I didn't even know they were still around," and yet they're just headlining Glastonbury, they're touring the world, they're still putting out records, but they don't get played on mainstream radio. They don't get that same kind of level of hype. There's no magazines anymore, so people just
I think you're right. I don't think we're ever going to have a moment. I mean, I think it's probably culturally and physically impossible now for us to do something like that. But I feel like I would not be shocked, especially as you're mentioning, headlining Glastonbury, and me and Helio constantly go back and we'll remind ourselves we need to watch that again, because that whole the whole stage and crowd scene for that Glastonbury set is insane. But watching something like that does make me feel like I mean, it's happening for a lot of 90s bands right now, and it happened for Daft Punk, where when you have this kind of bedrock of popularity, even if other people don't know about it, there's always the chance that something happens and everybody kind of turns around and says, we want this again. And I think it was maybe a little bit of an artificial push for Daft Punk when they did it, but I could totally see something like that happening for the Prodigy if a new album comes in and enough people have that attitude. I think it can happen.
I think we're at the end of the 80s revival now. So the 80s generation are all now in their 60s.
Mm.
The 90s generation are in their 50s. And their kids are left home, or leaving home, and they're rediscovering their youth. So you're seeing a lot of the 90s bands reforming already. Some of the acts from that era are bigger than they've ever been before. They ever were. So, you see Underworld and Orbital huge again. I see Moby's just announced a massive comeback tour gig in the UK. So a lot of those that artists from that era are coming back bigger than they were back then. But that's not unusual, because I saw Joy Division play. Their average crowd was between 50 and 200. If they came back, if they were able to come back now, they wouldn't have a stadium big enough for them. And this is kind of what happens is the 90s has moved into this nostalgia period where people are going back and rediscovering and reliving it. And that has this huge knock-on effect. So there's a lot of people who didn't wish they'd seen the band in the first place and didn't. A lot of people who have discovered bands, discovered 90s subsequently, and suddenly you've got these artists, like I say, we're playing to very few people, are now selling out massive stadiums, and it's bizarre, but yeah, enjoy the 90s. We're going through it again, but I don't think people will queue up in a record shop, but they will queue up and spend stupid amounts of money to see them play live in a stadium. There's a My Bloody Valentine. They were big, popular. They were popular at the time when they were around, but they weren't like the biggest venue in the UK popular. And they just sold out. I think it was 5 nights or something in the UK before Christmas. Put in the biggest venue. It's just insane. So that does my head in a little bit. I just wish that if all these people who are rediscovering the 90s, if only a couple of thousand buy my books,
there you go.
I'll be very happy.
It's all about the timing.
So you are working on a follow-up.
Yeah, so the follow-up's called We Live for the Beats. And like I said, it kind of picks up from that moment where he's thrown away the Battle of Land 2 and chucked out, and he started working on Always Outnumbered. So it picks up from there and goes up to the set of gigs after Keith's funeral. So they come back after Keith's passing. I had written it, but I'm because of Keith passing, I've had to go and rewrite it because it's completely changed the dynamic of the story, and I didn't have any energy to do it, to be honest. I just didn't want to go there for a while, and I know they felt the same about music. So this album's been the new album's a long time coming. They were also making a documentary, and I'd agreed with one of the managers that I wouldn't put the book out whilst they were working on the documentary. And then I was told they'd stop the documentary, so get it going. So I've been working on the book, and now apparently they're doing the documentary again. Who knows? No. The world of the Prodigy changes from day to day.
Just roll the punches, I guess. Yeah.
So
it's all good.
So if that one's upcoming, what's the one that's out now that people should go grab immediately?
Well, book wise.
Yeah, anything that you're putting out.
Well, this We Eat Rhythm is the first half of the story, and it's actually only available through Bandcamp, because why worry about shops now?
Yeah.
I'm making it available through Bandcamp. It's a 10 by 10 inch. I don't know what that is in centimeters or millimeter or whatever, but it's a square book with full of photographs and artwork and loads of interviews and what have you. I've self-produced it because I've been ripped off by too many publishing companies now that I refuse to sell this story to a publishing company. And the new ones, I'm going to do the same. So if you go to Bandcamp and look up and look up Prodigy Story Part 1 and 2, or my label publishing company is called State of Bass, which is also the name of my book about drum and bass, State of Bass.
Yeah, I don't want
We're going to make sure to have links to those in the descriptions for everybody out there too, looking to grab a copy of that.
Yeah, I don't want to blow up his spot, but Helio's been playing around with his synths and EDJ equipment lately. I was telling him he should send some demos to State of Bass now that we haven't in.
Yeah. We've I think since the last time I spoke to you guys, my album came out. My newest album, Nostalgia Death Star, came out, and that's gone down really well. It's
nice.
got album of the year, and it's done okay. It's
where do we find that?
It's on all streaming platforms.
Death Star Nostalgia.
And again, Bandcamp. So Nostalgia Death Star.
Nostalgia Death Star. Got it. Awesome.
And So I still do it. I still make music and I still release music.
Well, once again, thank you so much for gracing us with the presence and the stories and the knowledge. Yeah, it makes all of this. It makes the episode much deeper. You know, and that's kind of what we. That's kind of the whole point of the show. Really, is we felt like there's not enough behind the scenes info out there about music. You know, sometimes you get it for movies and things like that, but there's not enough sources for this kind of info out there. So yeah, this is what we dreamed of having when we did the show. So thanks again for coming on.
That's cool. That's always happy.
Always a treat to talk with you, and I know our listeners love it as well. So thank you again.
And we'll definitely find more reasons to have you on.
Yeah, I'm not just about the Prodigy.
Yeah, of course.
No, exactly. I started reading, the State of Bass book, and I think I'm gonna keep looking for more books of yours to read. It's just been so much music knowledge to absorb out there, and then trying to do an episode each week on a different album. Like, brain is swelling.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's what I love when I start exploring music. When you start hearing all these different stories, this information, and it's kind of like hidden stories as well that I love. And that's a lot of what I did as an academic, was about hidden histories. So unearthing lots of hidden history about punk, for instance, which, as you know, because I ran away from home when I was 14 to follow the Clash. And I was obsessed with that era because it became retold as something different. Mm-hmm. All those bands were resold in a different way. It didn't make sense. So that's what I'm interested in. So I'm waffling on, trying to bring it to a close.
Well, that'll be our cliffhanger for next time. Well, next time we hit something from that punk era, we'll come back to you and at least get a clip, at least get an opinion on it. So, all right,
I'm here.
Okay. Until then, this is the Indy 500 podcast and Professor Martin James.
Good to see you all.